The founding festival of the Tempest Federation was a success, and with that the festival came to an end. It had been a busy 10 days, and all the invited guests as well as visitors from the neighboring nations had all left the town. That included the King of Bloomond and Fuse, who both seemed to have something to discuss regarding their future plans, and went home as soon as they could. Dwarven King Gazel promised to elect a squad of researchers and also left pretty early. As for the Emperor of Sarian, Omija, she bought some sort of inn near the guest hotel, located in the prime district of town. She picked one of the rooms in it and set up a magic portal, apparently for the convenience of coming back for fun at any time. As expected from a billionaire, she really was lavish with her spending. I still remember the superiority lot and smile Omija gave the clearly jealous Gazel chances for he'll march right back to Dworgen and have their treasury authorize the cash to purchase one of our villas. Maybe I should be thanking Omija. Even better, she agreed to continue employing our local people working there under the same conditions. Rigor took care of the detailed arrangements involving chores such as providing her food and routinely cleaning her room. I guess next time I visit, I'll transfer my consciousness to homunculus. It's a pity that I can't fully enjoy myself with that body. Your Majesty, please stop being so self-indulgent. An example to counter her point this time was the fact that Omija herself leaving the nation had already caused Armageddon. Although this had nothing to do with us, Alalud must have been tormented beyond his breaking point. Even the mobilization of the bodyguards to protect Omija the Magus was considered a serious matter in terms of national defense. Is that so? Then is Elin using a homunculus as well? Elin was Alalud's daughter, so she was of course also an elf. Her ears, however, looked human. Oh, about that, Elin-chan is using her own body. Homunculi are not all powerful. In fact, prolonged use of one puts the user at risk. Your Majesty, your nonchalant attitude leaking national secrets will cause huge problems. From my private conversation with Omija, Elin seems to have been using drugs to alter her appearance and use her own body to travel. That was why Alalud was always worried and had sent many bodyguards in secret. Speaking of which, to my utter surprise, Cable and Guido were both members of the Magus. Alalud was just shouting that dispatching even one of these knights would affect national defense, yet he was generous enough to send 2 by his daughter's side. Alalud sure cared a lot about his daughter. But how come those 2 never looked that strong? When I ran analyze and assess on the 2 in the past, they appeared to be quite weak. Therefore, I asked to clarify my doubts. Alalud, on the other hand, answered with quite a bit of restraint. That's top secret as well, but I'll let you in on it. Those 2 have equipped magic rings that limit their abilities. If Elin really were to fall into danger, the limit would then be removed. That's what he said, so does that mean that Sarian's sorcerer technology is superior to my analyze and assess? I was quite surprised. But now that I thought about it, the accuracy of my analyze and assess back then was vastly inferior to what I have now. Perhaps today I'd be able to see through their hidden strength. It seemed that I couldn't let my guard down, just because I had run an examination or 2 on a person. I really need to be more cautious from now on. Next time I meet the 2, I'll secretly run an analyze and assess on them. Then, please take care of my daughter. Well then, till next time. With that said, Omija's party went aboard their kingdom's guardian Dragon King's ship to return to their nation. Demon Lord Luminous on the other hand was very casual with her travel methods, since she could use her immense power to cast spatial movement and return to her kingdom almost instantly. As for the orchestra exchange, she told me she'd contact me about the matter in the future. Hinata remained in town. She checked on the kids' classes at the church and occasionally sparred with them. At the time, we couldn't find any suitable teachers for the children. It was at that point that Hinata showed up. Until then, she had been maintaining the peace of the Western nations as the commander of the Holy Knight Order. We would collaborate from now on, and since we were handling the peace in the south for now, Hinata also seemed to have gotten some spare time. If you don't mind, could you spend some time with the kids? I asked her. Although I know how to use magic, I'm not really a great teacher. Sure. I've already used elemental magic waypoint teleportation to register the town. I'll drop by to take care of the kids when I'm free. Hinata accepted my request without hesitation. She really came in clutch this time. After all, I had no intention of letting the children return to Ingratia in the first place. Due to my suspicion towards Yuuki, it was better to not leave them in the care of the kingdom of Ingratia. That's why I brought them out using the festival as an excuse. I didn't forget to register their transfer. In any case, instructing the children became more and more of a challenge for the schools of Ingratia. After merging them with spirits, they had obtained incredible power. Any average tutor wouldn't have been able to handle them. So right now, I had to find someone who could properly instruct them. Yuuki told me that the Holy Knights were the most capable of commanding spirits. I had mentioned spirits by accident back then during our conversation. And according to Yuuki's reaction at the time, he seemed to have known about it from the start. I should probably have kept it a secret. Report. You should have kept it a secret indeed. Right. Even Raphael-san seemed to be rubbing the salt in the wound. No, even if I hadn't said anything, he probably would have found out anyway. We're just overthinking it, so let's not worry about it too much. Sorry. I still spilled the beans despite my suspicions towards Yuuki. I realized that in some corner of my heart, I still wanted to believe in him. I'll have to reflect on this slip-up and be more cautious in the future. The children were now my responsibility. And given these circumstances, Hinata's help was a godsend. The children also grew very close to Hinata through their time spent together during the festival. She was a perfect candidate. Speaking of having Hinata as a teacher, maybe I should also be a student and learn some things from her. After I settled on the idea, I stood alongside the kids behind the row of desks. Yet Hinata glared at me. What are you trying to do here? Well, I wanted to observe for a bit. You're a nuisance, so get out now. Ah, yes ma'am. And so I was chased out cruelly. What a pity. This was what happened around a week after the end of the festival. The traffic on the streets had gradually settled down, and the residents were no longer that busy. And so, we began to open and run the moderated dungeon. Quite a few adventurers seemed eager to explore the dungeon, and a great number of them had inquired about it. And, as if in response to their expectations, we finally opened up the labyrinth. We had already made sufficient preparations and waited until just the right moment to open. The days gradually became busy. Problems emerged within hours of the debut. The issue at hand was the unexpectedly reckless and stupid way challengers went about exploring the dungeon. We expected this to happen for the first demonstration during the opening festival. That's why we took steps to lower the difficulty accordingly. But despite all that, the challengers were still having too much of a hard time. It would appear that what we set up was just not gonna work. We didn't put any traps on the first floor, and the monsters that spawned there were at most F-rank mobs. Being incapable of combat, these were monsters even a villager could easily handle. The intent behind the design of this floor was to provide challengers with a sense of pride and accomplishment, and familiarize everyone with the environment inside, which was why we only placed monsters in the rooms that contained treasure chests. That said, the previous fall traps that Rammers set were all removed. So, in order to successfully break through the floor, you would still need to sketch maps. The way I saw it, no matter how slow you were, a whole day was the longest you would need to complete the floor. Yet for the past 3 days, not a single one managed to get to the second floor. Even that squat Bassin-led got lost big time and just gave up. Even though Bassin's squat already had experience with the labyrinth, they still didn't plan out any noteworthy strategy. Should I say that I'm dumbfounded or what? But I guess you could say Bassin's squad was doing well, especially considering that some teams even fell victim to rank D monsters. Perhaps I should correct myself. That happened to a lot of teams. Most of them were likely blinded by greed and didn't discover the monsters lurking at the room's corners. Plenty of idiots like that went straight for the treasure chest instead. They were probably caught by surprise by mere skeleton archers. As these comically bad adventurers rushed towards the treasure chests, their backs were inevitably pierced with arrows. In other words, they just sucked. Their danger awareness was practically non-existent. Among the idiots, some were at least smart enough to come in squads. Yet there were really no limits on human stupidity, since some of them actually tried to challenge our labyrinth on their own. That kind of behavior bordered on insanity. As I've mentioned, the spawn rate of monsters on the first floor was really low, and even if any were to spawn at all, they were rank F at best. That said, when appearing in a group, monsters like those could still pose a threat. Actually, whether it indeed posed a threat was subject to debate. Rather, I should say that it posed sufficient threat to the challengers. If you were to come in alone, even resting would prove challenging. With no one on guard, you couldn't even take a nap. No matter how weak rank F monsters were, they were still capable of hurting you. Certain types of monsters would launch a sneak attack on sleeping humans, and if you weren't cautious enough, you could easily wind up dead. I initially thought that these solo challengers had some great strategies in mind, but it turned out that they were just a bunch of brainlets. These reckless idiots didn't get anywhere and immediately left upon exiting the labyrinth. But to be honest, based on how they had acted, they wouldn't have lasted any longer, even if they had managed to somehow make it further down. From floor 2 onward, not only were there more monsters in the hallways, but ranky opponents would also start spawning among them. When challengers made it to floor 5, they would begin to face rank D monsters as well. If you had trouble merely getting through these earlier floors, you would definitely be killed when encountering rank D monsters. One of the challengers had a particularly embarrassing reason for forfeiting. He was starving. On every 10th floor we had set a save point, and on every 5th floor we had a safe zone prepared where water could be refilled. We also subtly reminded everyone to bring more rations. The other adventurers seemed to have made plans after analyzing Bassin's squad's experience. But that alone wasn't enough. Adventurers seemed to be a very prideful bunch, and they often ignored others' advice. Not sure whether it was the fact that they couldn't die in the labyrinth, or that they were overconfident in their abilities. Either way, many of them didn't bring any rations. If you got so lost that you were unable to find your way back to the entrance, then starvation came as no surprise. No matter how I thought about it, it was their own fault. They wanted to open as many treasure chests as possible, although I suppose I remember how that feels. If our labyrinth were truly designed with the intention to kill, I doubt there'd be anyone who could crack it even after 100 years. But at this time, the challengers were either impoverished bodyguards or mercenaries, all of whom sucked at exploration. We don't have to panic just yet. With that thought, I held my expectations for the next 3 days. Yet, in the end, not a single one managed to reach the safe zone on the 5th floor. The attempts have been miserable. That being said, we did profit off of the entry fees, which was always a plus. But if this were to continue, the adventurers would all have low morale, and chances of challengers returning would be minimal. It looked like we needed to re-examine the whole project. This unexpected matter had caused me grave concern.